they're doing everything they can to start getting the real estate market going, because everything's so much downstream of new builds, existing builds, all that stuff that is driving the economy. And a lot of people, millennials in particular, put in rental properties as their investment strategy, right? So you have a lot of people who are banking on rent and everything in this industry that really drives a lot of the economy.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is the show where we teach you to make massive income, not just passive income, with your real estate investing business. And we are here on this fine Wednesday for the previously known Mike and Dan show, now the Mike, Dan, and Dylan show. And on these Wednesday episodes, I, Mike DeHaan, hang out with my co-hosts here, Dan Austin and Dylan Cook, to talk about real estate investing, business, and whatever else we feel like for the week. And so we are coming into quarter three. I guess it's officially quarter three now, isn't it? Yeah, we're first week of July. And I don't know. I feel like it sounds super cliche, but I'm always marveled at how fast the years seem to go when you sort of have your head down. And July has traditionally been kind of a slower month for us, but it has been off to a pretty good start so far. We have a ton of fresh leads coming in. We have several deals that are going to be closing over the next couple of months. I think we have 18 in escrow right now, Dan. We got a lot of stuff moving. Dylan's been crushing it over there in Cincinnati. And I think the real estate market in general is just kind of interesting because we have this, ongoing affordability situation that's been going on for years now, where people can't seem to afford stuff. And one of the things I guess we're going to dive into is what the feds are kind of doing to try and make houses more affordable, which is something that I've been thinking about this a lot, because I feel like they kind of went through this phase of like, how do we help people make more money? How do we help make people financially stable? How do we sort of like fix the housing market with these, different things, putting in legislation and stuff. And all of a sudden they're like, what if we just messed with the system so houses were actually cheaper for people?
Let's just keep fucking with all the stuff. It's kind of like when you're like trying to biohack and then you give yourself MRSA because you thought it was cool to like, I don't know, inject yourself with Epsom salt or whatever these nerds out there are doing these days, right? Like you kind of screw up the system. Sometimes like capitalism just needs to like let its own thing go and figure it out. Let the market powers shift things. That's my belief.
Yeah. I mean, if there's like a forest fire, right? Like it takes time for that to heal, right? And regrow. Like it needs time for things to come back to a homeostasis, right?
Yeah. You can't just go in there and start planting new trees.
You know what?
Guess what happens? Another forest fire.
Yeah. As someone that lives somewhere where forest fires are, I agree. Just let them burn. I can tell you don't have fires in Cincinnati. It shows.
Let it burn.
I didn't say let it burn.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing that Grant Cardone said. One of your favorites, actually, Mike. I know you kind of grew up listening to Grant Cardone. So
yeah.
But he has an interesting point of view that I would bring up to this. His point is that when interest rates go down, prices will go up, or prices will go down with them.
And why?
Why?
That's exactly, because you would think the opposite, right? So like I've been a believer that like, hey, if they drop interest rates right now, prices are going to keep going up. But like his point is right now, there's people still buying houses, and there are, right? Like it's not like real estate market stopped. I mean, Dylan, you're selling your flips, right? New home buyers, there's people stepping up. The biggest people in real estate are the new home buyers and the people stepping up, like mostly people stepping it up because they actually have equity to put into this group. But like those are the two people. It's not the boomers, right? The boomers are not usually stepping up. If anything, they're just dying and then their house becomes inventory.
But his point, a second home.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. So his point though is that historically, actually, when interest rates have dropped in the immediate term, that prices go down. I was like, that.
So I think I know why. It's because if you look actually at interest rates, it's typically they drop them as soon as basically we go into recession because they try to stimulate it. So there's a lag effect. So that recession immediately was like prices go down for the short term, but they're going to bounce right back up.
Right. So in the near term, when the interest rates go down, you should buy. And then eventually prices go back up.
Yeah,
I would follow that logic.
I mean, I appreciate what you're saying there, Dylan, because it was Grant Cardone. I didn't do any other like research on it. So I was like, honestly, not a bad, like, I don't believe it because I don't just believe anything, but he actually had some decent logic behind it, and I just left it at that. So that would make sense that there is a lag effect, and it speaks to any KPIs or metrics you're looking at. If you're looking at it in a narrow bandwidth, you can say anything.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But like, so I guess what, this affordability thing that we're getting at here too is, they look at like the overall spectrum and how can we get people in more houses. And the rise a little bit lately has been 40-year mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like, and I actually had one of these pitched to me in 2023 as a investor loan, and it was 10 years of interest only. And then at year 10, it just goes into a normal rate and term, but at like the purchase price and loan amount that you had locked in 10 years ago.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the reason they consider this though as well, right, is because if the purchase price is the same, but it's dragged out for an additional 10 years, then the monthly payment will be lower, and the vast majority of Americans, especially those that can't afford anything right now, they live on basically biweekly, like paycheck to paycheck, or they live on monthly budgets. And so for them, that monthly number is ultimately the limitation towards them being able to buy a house. I mean, because also too, like if you look at buying a house with the bank and you have to go and get approved, they always look at your monthly debt to income ratio. Yep. They don't look at it over a 6-month span or a year's literally span. That's why if you're an entrepreneur or you're like a real estate investor that like flips houses and you get these large chunks of money, it kind of sucks to buy a house for yourself because they'll be like, how much money have you made this year? Nothing. But it's like, yeah, but I'm gonna make $200,000 next month. Like, yeah, but I don't care because up to this point, you've made nothing this year.
Yeah. Or they still don't care. Or you made $200,000 every month. They're like, yeah, we don't trust that you'll make $200,000 next month.
Exactly. Because it's not fixed.
It's not fixed. Yep.
Yeah. So that the 40-year mortgages though, they're non-conforming loans. So are these not Fannie Freddie loans, or
so they're not. The most of them that I could tell are not Fannie Freddie, and so these are going to be like people who keep them on their own books. So that's why there could be a wide variety between what they offer, right? It'd be up to the bank on LTV, interest rate, balloon, an ARM if it's fixed. Yeah. So it's really going to be lender dependent on who wants to do that.
I can't imagine that many lenders would get into this though, because so many banks and also the US in general is kind of propped up by the mortgage industry right now.
Yeah, but lenders, the way an amortization schedule works is most of the interest is paid in the front end. That's why they love refinances. That's just restarts that cycle over and over again. Yeah.
So that's interesting though. I'm looking at the notes of one you were offered, Dylan, and I'm like, I don't hate that product as an investor, which is 10 years interest only and then 30-year normal amortization, right? 30 years. So amortizes at 30 years, which is this exact same loan amount because it was interest only. So if that interest only is the same amount, or it can be refinanced to, I guess it doesn't really matter, but like say it's at 5 or 7%, that's significantly lower than an amortized loan every month. So you could be cash flow heavy in the first 10 years and sell that freaking thing at a higher appreciated value. Because likely, if you're on Mike and I's plan, it's like, we don't love anything we like, we'll sell anything at the right time. And usually within 1 to 10 years is the right time to sell an asset that you bought because it's getting into that second capitalization cycle.
Yeah. So I almost think these do make more sense for investors versus homeowners.
Oh yeah. Right? Homeowners now I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'd be.
They're not looking at the loan amount that they're paying between those different times. Right. But if they're like, well, I could take this 30-year loan and buy a $250,000 house, or I could take this 40-year loan and buy a $350,000 house.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Like, I feel like most of the population is going to choose that $350,000.
And they're always like, I'll make more money in the future. So it doesn't matter if this costs me more when it amortizes, and they inevitably never do because the household income's still $55,000.
Yeah. I mean, for investors, it almost seems like a no-brainer, especially if like you're trying to be a cash flow investor, right? Because like those interest only directly into like that amortized product. Realistically, most people are not going to be looking to hold stuff forever. A lot of people, I feel like you start off being a real estate investor, like I'm going to hold this property for the very long term. Then all of a sudden you start having all these CapEx items start to add up. You start to like learn about business, about the velocity of money, and you look at your equity and you're like, why the fuck am I still owning this thing? Right. So like it'll allow you to, like I said, squeeze so much more out of the early phases. And
a value add product with interest only, like that's actually not uncommon for commercial loans. Like a 2-year IO period or something is kind of common. I think it's just the length of duration of 10 years being interest only. You're just banking really on appreciation or any kind of forced appreciation that you can do to the property.
Yeah. Well, I guess I just can't see like, so all these banks, if they're, suddenly carrying all this money on their books and it becomes like a much more affordable or desirable product for home buyers. Like I don't know, what does that mean long-term for your like federally backed mortgages?
It's somewhat valuable for the mortgage industry, in my opinion, because it decentralizes a little bit.
Yeah.
Who cares if the hedge funds and the bankers don't have as many mortgage-backed securities? I'm sure they will find a way to wrap these up and do bank acquisitions at that time. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I think from a security and safety standpoint, having it more decentralized isn't a bad thing, as long as it's not concentrated, like we found out like Silicon Valley Bank and all these other places where they had concentrated debt in places that were volatile at that time.
So private equity, which is what got them. But yeah, I mean, that's a valid point though, Dan, is like they'll probably just have to reformat how they exit their loans, and if it becomes a large enough thing, the federal government will come back, well, I guess we have to buy these now.
Yeah, that's I don't know the exact definition here, but most banks work on a level of deposits, and then they can lend out to a certain multiple of those deposits. Yep. So if you're getting a bunch of these mortgages in there, I don't know how that affects their other ability to lend if they are lending out at 90% LTV on an interest only product, right? Like
totally. Yeah. And I would guess that a lot of the banks like we use, like the regional banks or credit unions, they prefer these like 7 and 10 year loans as opposed to a 40-year loan that could potentially sit on their books for 40 years, right? Because at that 7 to 10 year like commercial loan that we're getting with our commercial product Mike and I get for our properties is like they can see those things cycle and roll over so much quicker than a fixed 40-year loan.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I was looking at them too. The lenders that are listed on this article, I mean, they're not lenders that I've ever really seen. Carrington Mortgage, M Bank, NewFi Lending, and the New Res. I've only seen New Res because they service one of my loans. And they have the worst fucking online platform.
They are terrible, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so bad.
But I mean, you're not seeing this from like Wells Fargo, right? Or like Chase.
Right. But it's like, is that just the fact that they don't need to? They're already printing money. Yeah. Like
maybe. Yeah.
So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, because ultimately, like, the feds, they are strongly incentivized to have as much home ownership as possible, because statistically that leads to the best financial security for people in later life, which is a huge liability that the U.S. government currently carries with Social Security and everything else. Like, ideally, what the government would love is to have zero Social Security. Everyone owns a home. And then when they're old and decrepit, they're forced to sell their home and just like pay for the rest of their shit. Yeah. Right. But they kind of have a mix of that right now.
Did we
think how downstream? Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I was going to say, think how downstream real estate is to everything else.
Yeah,
contractors, the Home Depots, the suppliers, oil, even like the gas that has to go back to and from. A lot of stuff relies on the real estate market.
Absolutely. I mean, all the roads that are getting built and the major infrastructures to lead you to houses, right? Yeah. And more houses,
which is more government jobs that are getting. So that's another reason why they love it.
It's huge. More hospitals, more schools,
or even how most places collect taxes. The property 100%. Taxes pay for a huge amount of everything. And how much, renters only pay property taxes proxy through the home, like the landlords.
Right.
Right. But if you have a bunch of homeowners who feel secure and they're not going to leave, that is basically fixed recurring income they can get. As opposed to if they increase something like sales tax, people's spending habits will change. But if you increase property taxes, most people aren't going to move because that, unless it's something that's absolutely ridiculous. So
totally. One thing I was going to mention on this topic too, because I think it leads into a couple of different directions here. Basically, the Biden administration put into law or put into effect, whatever the fuck that means, I don't know, but that you can refinance your existing mortgage at the exact same rate that you had it at before. Meaning you could refinance, cash out some of your money, and like I have a 2.25% interest rate on my house. I could pull out a couple 200-300 out of my house at 2.25 and then go and buy an RV.
You're still resetting the loan amount.
You're still resetting. It's a normal refinance, but it guarantees you, the government is guaranteeing you the previous rate. So
honestly, I would do that in my house right now.
My guess is you're not allowed to, because you're probably you probably exceed the wealth requirements for that. I would guess there's probably some sort of income level that
if it's based on income, I mean, you know how tax depreciation works with real estate.
It's true. You could, Dylan. Now we're going down this path. Yeah, you're right. So, but you could get these 40-year mortgages. They're doing everything they can to start getting the real estate market going, because to your point is everything's so much downstream of new builds existing builds, all that stuff that is driving the economy. And a lot of people, millennials in particular, put in rental properties as their investment strategy, right? Or as an investment strategy, right? So you have a lot of people who are banking on rent and everything in this industry that really drives a lot of the economy.
Yeah.
A lot of the GDP.
This wasn't on the topic today, but I remember seeing a demographic article that basically said like, the boomers basically like stocks and bonds, right? And then like the Gen Xers before that are basically still stocks and bonds, maybe a little real estate. But as you get younger in that demographic, more and more people are like, real estate's going to be part of my retirement portfolio.
Yeah.
Right.
And Gen Zs don't want to own shit. Like that's what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is fascinating if you think about it, because the boomers, I believe that when the boomers start dying off, which is not too long from now, there's probably going to be a flood of real estate on the market, and they're going to have to know what to do because they're dying in place, meaning they are not selling their homes and moving into old folks' homes like their parents' generation did. The bulk of them are dying in home, right? So they're keeping their house until they die. And so if they start rolling off, millennials, we're already balling out, right? Like we got our houses, we got our vacation homes or our Airbnbs, whatever. Like we own our rental properties that we can bounce around to or make income on. And then on the flip side, Gen Z, who's a smaller generation, doesn't want to own anything. So what's going to happen to all those houses?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the interesting thing is, Dan, is you're right. There's a huge subsect of millennials that are doing well. There's also like 50% of millennials that are still living with their parents.
Yeah, but I feel like
the current statistic.
I mean, I don't know.
I think you just have wealthy friends, Dan. I think
maybe.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, I mean, this is something when people rip on us on Instagram for different things. And I'm always like, I don't know what to tell you. Like you say that everyone you know is having hard times, Mr. Random Instagram person. A lot of my friends are in Europe for 3 months right now. Like just different social circles, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Silver spoon, whatever you want to say. Either way, I've been really fucking busy for the last 4 years and I'm in a pretty good spot. And so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I don't know. There's always this like dichotomy with me that's like, sure, if you just want to go be a plumber, you shouldn't also have to be a stock investor or investing guru to get by. Like, you just be able to be a plumber and be able to live a middle-class life. But also, like, there's nothing wrong with applying yourself, living with intention, and making a fuck ton of money. Like, you shouldn't be mad at someone else for doing that.
Yeah. No. So, yeah.
Just better playing the game.
What everyone goes back to is like, man, when my grandpa was growing up, he had a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids, and he was a mailman. He could afford to buy, like, a 6-bedroom house. It's like... Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too, is now we're going down this path, but a lot of people complain about that. But a lot of people do. They're like, well, it would like the difference is how much money they made versus what cost to buy a house, and like the American dream was cheaper back. Totally. I believe those numbers, but guess what? There's fucking AI out there that does your job. And when you go to work, you twiddle your thumbs for like 30 hours a week, and then you get paid for the work you do for 40. Right. And so it's like life is infinitely easier. You have cell phones, you have all this sort of stuff that makes it so you could make vastly more money if you choose to.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, there's your breakdown of today's pull your bootstraps up fucking baby boomer show. But
well, I just love the flip side of that token is like, I'll talk to really like a slumlord. Like, I had an 18% interest rate on the slum. Yeah, but you bought it for $10.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yes. Totally.
So, all right, moving on. One other thing I wanted to kind of talk about, because I've had some struggles with contractors myself lately, and like, the ones I used at the beginning are not the ones I use now, both from a skill level, but also just reliability. They just kind of disappear sometimes. So just wanted to get you guys' general take on, we can go into some contractor best practices, but what are your guys' thoughts on half-life of a contractor? What do you look for when you're hiring a new one? Maybe let's start there.
Oh man.
Half-life on a contractor.
Yeah, right.
Depends. We've had 2 weeks before. I would say interesting about contractors in our space. So there are very wealthy contractors that have done very well for themselves in this world, right? They're doing better than we are, right? They're not the kind of person we're looking for. We're not looking for really custom, high quality work. We're looking for somebody that can do the work for cheap, and they're at varying degrees in their career, whether they're an alcoholic or have an issue with getting a job, or they're starting out and they just don't have any skill. So you're paying for like low skill. You're paying for like high skill that's honestly probably less available than you'd like because they have problems, and that's why they're working in our industry. And so I think that you can have a great contractor, great setup, and maybe you're going to get a year out of them. Maybe like if you have like a really good, like Mike and I had a guy that worked for us. He ran a couple guys for us, and he would still be working for us, but we just stopped flipping because we started losing money and he started making money. Right. And so it was like, good for you. And he's very talented. He is on the high end of the spectrum. However, he also is working in our industry for a reason. Right. And a lot of it's because guys don't want to have a boss, which also means that they don't want to work when they don't want to work. And so he, again, would still be working for us, but like we didn't have the work in front of him, which is another problem in this business, which is where I see people make bad decisions is they start buying flips or projects to keep their crew or their contractor busy because they don't want to lose them. And then you buy one or two bad deals and it wipes off half of your profits.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough place, right? Because basically the thing that you probably shouldn't do is go and look up like general contractors in your market on Thumbtack and like hire whoever is smart enough to have a Thumbtack account. Right. Because those are going to be people. And I would say,
you want.
Yeah. I would say if you go back like 5 years ago, like honestly, when I started flipping houses back in 2018, 2019, you could do that because everyone's prices were kind of similar. Now, just with such a scarcity of labor, and it being so hard to find work is like those people are going to charge you a lot of money, like way more than you should probably be paying, because the alternative is they just wait for somebody that wants a new kitchen that's doing that for, that's their only remodel they're going to do in their house for the next 20 years. And they are happy to pay $45,000 for a kitchen because for them, it's an investment. When you were trying to make money, those aren't the people that you want. And so like when it comes to full on contractors, like kind of like Dan said, if you get lucky enough to find a good one, use them as much as you can because sooner or later they're going to find out that if they are good, they can make a lot more money somewhere else. Right. And I think it's just like
they always inflate their prices as you go. It's like last time it was $5,000. Now it's $6,000 because they're testing it, which they should, right?
100%. I was just going to bring that up, Dan. Good point.
Yeah. And I was going to say, it's just like when you're hiring staff for your business, you kind of always need to be looking for them if you're going to be doing something that requires you to be that you're going to be renovating on a regular basis. Like every time that, someone posts on the local Facebook page that they're foolish enough to share somebody that just did some work for them, you should probably be building that relationship very quickly and trying to be, trying to get some work out of that person before they get oversaturated with everyone else that needs that work.
Totally.
Right?
It's almost like you have an abusive relationship. Like you got to tell them they suck all the time and make them feel bad and like, don't let anybody talk to them and like, don't talk to that guy over there.
Yeah. But
I mean, just like, but with anything, like I started doing a couple flips, used the same guys. I'm like, this is great. Like, I love these guys. And on my side, I was paying them quickly on time and I was paying for the materials, like trying to be the best person I could be for them. And then, but 3 or 4 houses down, I'm like, the quality of work just got by. So I don't know if they like had a different sub come in or what, but like, you almost have to, like you said, keep them like on rein a little bit, or like, they're just going to take if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile.
I remember the first contractor that Mike and I used as a partnership, Rob. He was actually a good contractor, right?
Well, he done great on several projects for me.
Yeah, like he was like a good work. I really liked him as a person. And then all of a sudden the project he's working on for us, it starts like taking longer and longer and longer. And then he's like not showing up. Well, the dude had picked up a job from some other lady like 3 doors down. And so his trailer would be over there all the time. And it was they was like stripping siding off, doing all the stuff. And I'm like, this son of a bitch, dude. Like he's like splitting time between projects and that's what happens because he was good. And somebody saw him. Why? Because it was on a busy road. And they're like, hey, would you flip our house 3 doors down? And he was like, sure, why not?
Well, and that's going to pay more than what you're doing.
Yep. Well, the real problem with that one too, Dan, if you remember, was it wasn't that our house was getting completely neglected. He had some freaking meth heads that were doing terrible work that he was working at our house, but he was still charging as if he was working on it. Right. So he was charging his like $70 an hour rate for some guys that like didn't even know which way to hold a hammer.
Oh yeah, dude. They're trying to, Oh my God. I remember walking up to some of those guys. You're like, Jesus Christ. But
do you remember when they were doing the drywall and they didn't cover the HVAC vents? So they're pumping all like the drywall shit like into the vents.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. They had our cool air intake on a brand new furnace too. It was like completely filled with like construction material. I mean, like I walked in there for the inspection. I was like, what the hell is this, dude? I'm like, glad we got a brand new furnace in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were pretty bad. It was rough.
A buddy of mine, he runs like a construction company, and just to get someone to show up, he basically has to start from like $35, $40 an hour.
Yeah.
So what do you think they're getting charging you, right, to bring those same
Yeah.
people in?
Well, yeah, and they've got to have a profit, right? Because if you're paying somebody, I get it. If you're going to have to pay a guy 35 to 40 bucks an hour, you can throw on 15% for payroll tax and all that sort of stuff. And then you have to have profit on top of that. And then you're going to have like the fact that when you have a company like that, you're really only getting 80% capacity, right? Because they got to show up to work. They got to do all this. So there's like 20% of dead hours, which has to go somewhere, right? And so it costs a lot to run a construction company. And those aren't the kind of guys we want. We want, to be honest, what we want is the guys that are cheap. They're probably going to last for like, hopefully stay sober long enough, and then you're going to make a pile of money and have to find somebody else.
Yeah. Or I'm going to say one thing here, which might sound politically incorrect. Most places will have some ethnic group that does cheap labor, will have undocumented family members.
Are meth heads considered an ethnic group now?
No, so I was up here. It's the Russians.
Yeah, it is Russians. Right?
Honestly, it's the Eastern Europeans. We have a ton of them out here, and they like their work's fine. Like it is some like sometimes they do like weird stuff and the houses are like they're unreliable. Or one time I had one that was installing a hot water heater and the guy tried to sell me a gun that he had.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that. But you have to, the problem is you kind of have to have an in with these people because a lot of them as well will be opportunistic. And so we have.
Well, it's the Russian culture is also a corrupt, like criminal type culture, right? Like how do I.
Like they try to haggle stuff totally.
And so it's not like well here's the, and I say that because like in the Sun Belt areas you have like Latino or Hispanic cultures, which is not, that's not, they don't have a corrupt culture, so you don't have to worry about that. But up here where our ethnic group is, like that's part of their culture. You have to realize that and understand it.
Oh, dude, they'll still haggle too. We got the guy did our landscaping at my house, Orlando. He's from Guatemala. Dude can't even read. Like literally, he brings his daughter with him. Who's like 9.
Also, only answers his phone like once a year when he's ready for work.
Yeah, because he's too busy balling out.
So
dude.
Busy.
He makes so much money. So he like did all of our landscaping in our house, like sprinkler, lawn, everything, for like $7,000. Like it's like so cheap.
$25,000 job.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, I'll come do it on Wednesday. His whole team showed up. They did it, everything else. And I was talking to him about it. I was like, that was like pretty cheap job. He's like, well, I come to your house, like you have a beautiful home. I look at you. I look at your cars. I talk to you about your business. I know that, you probably want a good deal, right? He's like, if I go over to this lady, I see brand new BMW, right? She tells me that somebody else quoted her $22,000, right? She does stuff. She's like, so for her, it's the same job, but 2 times as much.
Yeah. And she still thinks she's getting a great deal.
She still thinks she's getting a great deal, right? But like, you have to sort of nurture those relationships. And so like going back to like the Russians that are up here, if you aren't part of like the cool kids club, you're going to pay whatever they think they can get out of you. That's just kind of human nature, right? But once you start to have those connections, that's where you can start to do stuff at volume without needing to like hire a crew. Because we've also had guys like, who's the roofer that we've worked with, Dan, that like will have his brothers come out, they'll just come and do stuff. It's the roofer that we had one guy for a while that was Hispanic that would just come out and just like do stuff for so cheap, and it was always pretty solid.
We got a pretty heavy Hispanic like mix up here too. But yeah, I mean, I showed up after they completed drywall work with like a 6-pack Modelo, and like, dude, they love that shit. Like if you just like do the little things like that too.
Yeah, so absolutely. You got to take care of them just like anybody else. But I think to Mike's point is you have to kind of find that immigrant labor force, and that's how America has always been built. And the downside for them is which is also the upside, is there's no L&I. They're not part of the system, the American government system. And so there's none of that fat that they have to throw in there, right? Yeah. They just show up to work their ass off. You pay them for what they're doing. And that's why that system works so well. And that's why, honestly, America has been built really on immigrant labor, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just what it is.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is too, it's not even just like the blue collar stuff. It's currently the same with office labor too. Like if you go and you get some killer VAs, this is how we've built out our entire cold calling company right now, is we got some that were really good. And we said, do you have some friends? And they said, yeah. And they brought some good friends, and now we're in with that. And now if you want to keep hiring and keep scaling that, it's very easy to do.
Yeah, leverage that relationship.
And not only do you have to like find those, but you have to nurture those relationships. Kind of like Dylan said, you have to, do the extra little things. You have to keep them busy. You have to pay them when maybe paid on time, and you need to always be, I would say, like looking for the replacement for when ultimately they disappear.
You need 2 or 3 down your Rolex lists for sure. Exactly. One of them's not going to show up. You're going to need a timeline, and them not showing up is going to throw off the rest of the downtrack timeline. Yeah. So for sure. Yeah. One other thing, there was just a contractor painting at one of my buildings, and he cut his hand pretty bad. Like it went like down to the tendon, and he like the EMS showed up and everything. And I'm like,
oh Jesus.
I didn't really get any paperwork signed, like reliability release or anything like that. So I want to ask you guys, do you do anything like that? Or is that something you've thought about for previous projects?
We absolutely make sure that we do everything above board, and that we pay for insurance through like L&I insurance, and we do all that. All of our stuff is registered. We have general contractor's license, and we pull all permits. But I do know people that don't do any of that. And I get why they wouldn't do any of that, right? Because you don't know you're even supposed to do it. Honestly, we get into real estate investing as flippers or buy and hold guys. And you're like, yeah, you just do some work here. And the contractors we're working with generally don't want to pull permits because they don't even have a license.
Exactly.
So then there's that issue. So a lot of guys, to be above board, they go and get a general contractor license, which is not a bad idea to do if you really want to reduce liability, because if that does happen on your job site and they want to file an L&I claim, which they totally can.
Yep.
It's just as a regular construction person, then the state L&I is going to come after you, and they're going to say, "What are you doing here?" And then you can definitely you're going to technically have to pay for it
here. Like a GC license, I could probably do in an afternoon. Honestly,
same thing in Washington. There's no actual requirement for you to take a test or anything. It's literally just a paper process, right? But with that being said, there's a hell of a lot more liability. It's kind of like becoming a real estate broker, right? Now you are following underneath the real estate commission in your city or your state rather. And so if something happens, like, they're going to hammer you even harder. So you have to be careful with the general contractor license, because then if you don't do everything the right way and you get hammered, like, you get really hammered, because now you're basically raising your hand saying, like, I could potentially do some messed up shit, so that now they know who you are, right? They see you. And so you got to be super careful there. But that is definitely the right thing to do if you have contractors working for you that don't have general contractor license and L&I insurance, because ultimately, technically, you have to pay for that.
Yeah. The correct thing is, honestly, what you should do is get umbrella insurance if you want to make things like extra sort of sound, because umbrella insurance is not expensive and it will protect you from getting sued for pretty much anything.
But also, if you do that, you're going to have to make sure you're doing everything legally, because the umbrella is not going to pay out if you're doing janky shit.
There's a hard money lender that I ran into lately that they make you like have a GC on file, like on their application, and they have to be registered with the county to be like for them to land on the product.
Man, I bet they have a really hard time selling out freaking loans.
Yeah.
None of the good investors are going to them.
Right.
One thing I personally love about running contracts and running projects through my credit cards is I travel for free all the time now.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're running all those, and like all of it's on someone else's like private or hard money.
Yeah.
Right. You're just paying it through your credit card, then reimbursing yourself. So
yeah, there's a lot of people out there that use like the Capital One Spark, which I think is like 2% cash back on everything. We personally have always done the Amex, because there's no limit on what you can spend. And then we have the Amex Platinum, which it's expensive. It's like $700 a year to have that, but all the benefits you get with it. Like, I'm not as well traveled with Mike, so I'm not a Delta Diamond member, but with the Amex Platinum, you get free lounge access at Delta. So it's pretty sick, actually. There's a lot of travel perks with that alone. Plus Mike and I, we've got millions of points on that thing.
Yeah. So if you go to americanexpress.com/keys, you can get your free fucking
fire up
American Express.
We should get an Amex freaking referral. I always say, like, I love it from a business owner because there is no limit, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I have an Amex too. So
they do call you though. Like, definitely every time Mike and I have gotten like a new Amex for a new business, they're like, they always call me like the 28th of the month. They're like, yeah, so we just want to make sure you're good. Like, you still need to pay this off, right? Like we like $75K on a card, and they get super nervous. We're like, yeah, we got you.
Yeah. But I mean, like,
they don't call me.
Yeah, you're not spending enough yet. They do start to get a little bit funny. What's our biggest Amex bill you think we've done, Dan? Like 140?
Probably. At least 140, 150 a month. Yeah, that's kind of like our sweet spot.
Yeah, when we pile up all the marketing, and then we'll have like all these other like once a year expenses.
Other
both of our Go Abundance memberships go on there.
Yeah, exactly.
So next week, we're going to do a dive into some KPIs and some marketing stuff. So if that's of interest to you, to make sure that you subscribe and share this with your fellow investor friends so that they can go and learn the numbers behind a real estate business. Yeah. Look at that, promoting the next episode. We've never done that before because we've never had that much planning.
Yeah.
So instead On this one, you just got to listen to us talk like a bunch of freaking baby boomers telling all the crybabies to pull their bootstraps up.
Pull your bootstraps up.
So, but anyways, guys, we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
See ya.